In the gleaming corridors of a high-tech office in Atlanta, where ambition hums through the air and success is measured in clicks and code, one figure moves unnoticed. A woman in a gray janitor's uniform, her head bowed, her hands steady with a mop. Esther Williams, mother to the powerful Black CEO of TechRise, steps into a world that doesn't see her, a world her son built but can no longer fully trust. What begins as a quiet mission to uncover the truth behind whispered complaints soon becomes a raw, unfiltered test of character. One that will expose the masks people wear when they think no one important is watching. The hum of computers filled the air, a steady undercurrent to the rhythmic clatter of keyboards and the occasional ping of incoming emails. The open-plan office of TechRise in Atlanta was a sleek, modern space, glass walls, ergonomic chairs, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting from the communal kitchen. It was a place designed to inspire innovation, but beneath the polished surface, something darker lingered. Esther Williams adjusted the brim of her faded baseball cap, her fingers brushing against the coarse fabric of the gray janitor's uniform she now wore. At 62, her posture was still proud, her movements deliberate. She had raised her son, Devin Williams, to be a man of integrity, and now he was the CEO of this very company. But today, she wasn't here as his mother. Today, she was Mary Jones, a new cleaning staff member, stepping into the office with a quiet purpose. Devin had confided in her weeks ago, his voice heavy with concern. "Mom, I think there's a problem in the team. I've heard whispers about how some employees treat the support staff. I need to know the truth, but I can't just walk in and ask. They'll hide it." Esther had seen the worry in his eyes, the weight of leadership pressing down on him. That's when she'd made the decision. "Let me do it," she'd said. "I'll find out what's really going on." Now, as she pushed her cleaning cart into the office, she felt the weight of her mission. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow on the pristine floors, and the muted conversations of employees created a low buzz. Most of them didn't even glance her way as she moved past their desks. To them, she was invisible, a part of the background, like the hum of the air conditioning or the faint whir of the printers. "Hey, janitor!" The sharp voice cut through the ambient noise, drawing Esther's attention. She turned to see a man in his mid-30s, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, standing by the coffee station. His name tag read Eric Jennings, operations manager. He held an empty coffee cup in one hand, his other hand gesturing impatiently toward a spill on the counter. "Clean this up, will you? Or are you just here for decoration?" The words stung, but Esther kept her expression neutral. "Of course, sir," she replied softly, reaching for a cloth. As she wiped the counter, Eric leaned against the wall, watching her with a smirk. "You might want to pick up the pace," he added, his tone dripping with condescension. "We don't have all day." Esther's hands moved methodically, her mind racing. She had expected to encounter some level of disrespect, but the blatant rudeness took her by surprise. As she finished cleaning, Eric turned away without so much as a thank you, already engrossed in his phone. The rest of the day unfolded in a similar pattern. Employees walked past her without acknowledgement, some even stepping around her cleaning cart as if it were an inconvenience. In the break room, she overheard snippets of conversations, complaints about deadlines, gossip about coworkers, but no one spared a thought for the woman quietly mopping the floor. It wasn't until later in the afternoon that Esther made her decision. She was in the corner of the office, emptying a trash can, when she noticed a designer named Caitlyn Morgan deliberately toss a crumpled piece of paper onto the floor, missing the bin entirely. "Oops," Caitlyn said with a laugh, not bothering to pick it up. "That's your job, right?" Esther straightened, her eyes narrowing slightly. She didn't respond, but as she bent to pick up the paper, she felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about her son's company anymore. This was about respect, about the way people treated those they deemed beneath them. That evening, as she returned to her modest apartment, Esther pulled out a small digital recorder from her pocket. She had slipped it into her uniform earlier that day, just in case. Now, she pressed the record button and spoke into it, recounting everything she had witnessed. "Day 1, she began, her voice steady. Eric Jennings mocked me at the coffee station. Caitlyn Morgan threw trash on the floor and laughed. No one said a word. She paused, her mind replaying the events of the day. They don't see me, she continued, but they will. The next day unfolded with a relentless mix of ambient office sounds and covert undercurrents of indignity. As Esther moved stealthily through the expansive workspace of TechRise, her ears caught snippets of conversation that confirmed her worst suspicions. Near the reception area, she paused as she heard Eric Jennings' familiar, snarky tone raised in a conversation with another employee. "Can you believe it?" Eric said loudly, a self-satisfied chuckle following his statement. "Mary Jones, if that's what you call our new janitor. She really misses the mark on her duties. I bet she barely knows what a mop is for." His words, laced with contempt, rang out over the murmur of keyboards and the low hum of computer fans. Yet the sound was barely audible to most. The employees, immersed in their own tasks, pretended not to notice the incendiary remarks. Esther's heart tightened at the cruelty in his voice, but she pressed forward, determined to uncover every detail. As she rounded a corner near the design department, she paused behind a glass partition and witnessed even more relentless dismissiveness. There, sitting at a sleek workstation, was Caitlyn Morgan, the office designer, whose usual confidence now had a veneer of callous mockery. With exaggerated nonchalance, Caitlyn casually picked up a stack of sketches, then deliberately slid one important design proposal toward the trash bin. "There," she sneered, louder than necessary for only those in earshot. "That's what you call creative work. Maybe the intern should handle the leftovers if you can't make a proper presentation." Before anyone could respond, a young intern named Tyler, his eyes wide with anxiety, stepped forward to retrieve the discarded paper. Caitlyn laughed, and her scorn filled the space. "Nice try, but clearly you need more practice. That was your job, fixing what you mess up." Her tone was icy, barbed with a casual arrogance that made the small, timid intern shrink further into his seat, visibly trembling. The scene left Esther with a heavy feeling in her chest. These were not isolated incidents, but symptoms of a deeper, toxic culture hidden under the guise of professionalism. Feeling the weight of the injustice and the simmering tension that grew with every disparaging remark, Esther reached into her pocket. Earlier, she had discreetly clipped a tiny digital recorder to her belt, ready for this very situation. Now, with determined resolve, she clicked it on. As she walked past a row of cubicles, she muttered softly into the microphone, "Day 2 at TechRise. I've overheard Eric mocking the janitorial staff again, and now I've witnessed Caitlyn publicly humiliating our newest intern, Tyler. Their words are mean-spirited, demeaning." Her voice was steady and calm, belying the indignation she felt inside. She found a quiet alcove near a set of filing cabinets, and there, in a moment of rare privacy amidst the bustling chaos, she began scribbling notes in a small battered notebook. Every detail was recorded: Eric's exact phrasing about Mary Jones and his dismissive laugh, the tone of Caitlyn's sneers and the way she casually tossed the design papers aside, and the pitiful reaction of the intern who had almost dissolved into tears. Her pen moved rapidly, capturing dialogue and impressions, determined not to let his observations go undocumented. Every stroke of her pen served as both an act of defiance and an effort to expose the true nature of the toxic environment within TechRise. The office, which boasted the latest technology and a sleek modern design, revealed a stark contrast beneath its surface. A culture where status and elitism reigned over mutual respect. As the day wore on, the low hum of computers and the occasional clatter of keyboards continued unabated. But for Esther, every sound was now intertwined with the echoes of injustice. Her carefully collected notes and hidden recordings had become the first pieces of a much larger investigation. With a final, determined glance at the bustling activity before her, she closed her notebook and tucked it safely into her uniform. The tension was mounting, and she knew that tomorrow would bring even more revelations. For now, with her evidence in hand, she resolved that nothing would go unnoticed, and every act of disrespect would be brought into the light. That evening, as the last of the employees began to trickle out for their extended lunch break, Esther seized her chance. With her recorder safely stowed in her pocket and her battered notebook clutched firmly in hand, she slipped away from the bustling corridors of TechRise and made her way toward the conference room at the heart of the office. The room, with its polished glass table and soft overhead lighting, was usually reserved for high-level strategy meetings, a setting that, in this moment, would serve as the stage for a far more critical revelation. Under the guise of routine maintenance, Esther had arranged for a clean-up session. She casually swept into the conference room dressed in the same modest janitor's uniform and an unassuming baseball cap, her bearing calm as she navigated the disorganized clutter of stray coffee cups and crumpled papers. One by one, several mid-level employees trickled in to finish some last-minute tidying up, their conversations carrying an air of lax indifference to anything beyond the day's deadlines. As the clock ticked toward the scheduled maintenance break, Esther's heart pounded with a secret purpose. In that quiet moment just before the room filled completely, she took a deep breath. She knew this was her opportunity to reveal the hidden toxicity that had been festering in these sterile halls. Slowly and deliberately, she set up a small portable speaker and connected her hidden digital recorder to the conference room's sound system. With a mere press of a button, the recorders captured voices, recordings of Eric Jennings's biting insults and Caitlyn Morgan's casual mockery of an already demoralized intern, filled the room. "Listen carefully," Esther said softly but clearly, addressing the gathered employees. "You all may think these words are just office banter, but they exemplify a culture of disrespect that undermines our very values here at TechRise." Her eyes scanned the room as startled murmurs began to ripple through the group. Faces that had been nonchalant just moments before now registered surprise and discomfort as the raw audio played on. The snide laughter, the callous directives jabbing at the dignity of even the lowest-ranked staff, were laid bare before them, the harsh truth echoing across the polished surfaces of the conference room. Before anyone could speak, Esther reached slowly into her pocket and, with a steady hand, removed her baseball cap. In an act of controlled revelation, she tossed it aside, standing a little taller with an aura that hinted at a long-held authority suddenly emerging. "I am not Mary Jones," she declared, her voice rising to command attention. "I am Esther Williams, mother of Devin Williams, the CEO of TechRise." Her words cut through the murmuring dismay as stunned silence replaced the earlier casual indifference. The transformation was palpable, a shift from an anonymous janitor to the woman who had raised the very leader of the company. Faces in the room shifted as shock gave way to murmurs of disbelief. One by one, employees struggled to process the irony and gravity of the moment. For years, they had thought of the cleaning staff as merely background noise in the high-tech world of TechRise. Now they were forced to reckon with the fact that the person they'd mocked and belittled was not only a witness to their toxic behavior, but also the matriarch of the company's highest echelon. With purposeful calm, Esther continued, "Today, you will hear every last word you thought you could hide behind your laughter and arrogance. I have evidence, a complete audio recording of Eric's and Caitlyn's derogatory comments, and detailed notes of every incident I've observed this week." As she spoke, she held up her battered notebook where she had meticulously recorded every incident from the previous day, each scribbled note a testament to the disrespect and elitism that plagued the workplace. A heavy silence settled again as the gravity of her words sank in. The ambient hum of the air conditioner and the muffled clatter of keyboards in the background faded away, replaced by the quiet intensity of all eyes on Esther. One of the employees, a junior programmer with trembling lips, ventured a hesitant, I didn't realize." His voice trailed off, overwhelmed by the sudden epiphany that the luxurious veneer of TechRise had concealed a darker internal culture. Eric Jennings, who had been milling around the corridor just moments before, was not present in the room, yet his earlier insults still reverberated in the recorder's playback. And Caitlyn Morgan's callous laughter, a sound that had cut deep into the spirit of the intern Tyler, now echoed as damning proof against the superficial world they all inhabited. Esther paused, allowing the gravity of her revelation to climax. "This," she said firmly, lifting her eyes to meet each pair of stunned gazes, "is a call for accountability. It is a request for respect among colleagues, regardless of rank or title. Today, you will know that every act of belittlement has been noted and recorded. And if this toxic behavior continues, the consequences will be as severe as you never imagined. Her voice, both gentle and unyielding, seemed to hold within it the wisdom of countless battles fought against discrimination. In that charged moment, as her words continued to echo in the still air, the fate of TechRise, and indeed the entire ethos of the company, hung on the precipice of change. The gathered employees, confronted with the undeniable truth of their behavior, now sat on the edge of a transformation that they had long resisted. And with the final recording still playing in the background, a new chapter for TechRise was about to be written. A chapter driven by accountability, respect, and the undeniable strength of a mother who dared to unmask the truth. The atmosphere in the conference room grew even more electric as Esther Williams, having revealed her true identity, prepared to unveil the damning evidence that had been recorded over the past several days. With a deliberate motion, she retrieved her digital recorder from her jacket pocket and pressed play. The room's ambient hum of computers and murmuring voices faded as the recorded audio filled the space. On the large screen that hung in the center of the room, grainy video footage began to play. Scenes of Eric Jennings sneering and barking demeaning orders. One clip showed him hissing, "Pick up the spill, Mary Jones, or are you just here to decorate?" While another captured his cruel laughter as he mockingly directed an intern to clean up a mess. Alongside these recordings, the screen flashed several still images. Grainy photos taken by a security camera showed Eric, with a self-satisfied smirk, berating staff in a tone that left no doubt about his contempt for those he deemed beneath him. Another series of images captured a moment when designer Caitlyn Morgan carelessly tossed important paperwork toward a trash bin, laughing as if it were a private joke. A heavy silence descended upon the gathered employees as Esther's evidence lay naked on the screen. For a long heartbeat, there was nothing but the relentless murmurs of disbelief. Finally, Eric, his face turning a bitter shade of red, stepped forward, attempting to justify his behavior. "Look," he began, his voice strained. "It wasn't meant to be taken so seriously. It was just office banter. A bit of fun to lighten the atmosphere." His words came out in a rush, his tone pleading as if he sensed that the tide was shifting against him. Esther fixed him with a steely gaze, her voice calm yet carrying the weight of authority. "Office banter?" she echoed, her tone laced with quiet indignation. "The recordings and these photos clearly show a pattern of disrespect and outright bullying that has injected a toxic culture into our workplace. I have documented every instance where you and your colleagues have blatantly disregarded basic human dignity." She paused as she let the silence accentuate each word. "This is not the behavior of a team that deserves to work at TechRise. It is behavior that undermines our values and disrespects every employee." Across the room, the tension was so thick it seemed the very air held its breath. Some junior employees shifted in their seats, while others exchanged glances that spoke of shared disillusionment. The once smug expressions on Eric's face were gradually replaced by a dawning realization that his justifications were failing to silence the truth. Esther's eyes swept over the room as she continued. "I hereby order that effective immediately, you, Eric Jennings, and anyone who has participated in or condoned this behavior, be terminated from your positions. This ends today. We will no longer tolerate a culture where the dignity of every person is sacrificed for petty amusement." Her voice, resolute and clear, resonated throughout the conference room, leaving no room for argument. A murmur of shock rippled through those present, and one by one, the staff's faces betrayed emotions ranging from anger to sorrow. Eric opened his mouth to protest further, but his voice was drowned out by the weight of Esther's command. "Enough!" she declared, her tone final and uncompromising. "You have all been given opportunities, and this behavior has no place here." As if on cue, a few nearby managers and HR personnel, who had been watching silently, began hurriedly making calls to confirm the firings. The room erupted into a mix of stunned silence and subdued applause, a quiet, yet powerful acknowledgement of justice being served right before their eyes. In that moment, the truth she had painstakingly recorded and compiled was not only undeniable, but transformative. Esther stood as a symbol of accountability amid a wave of systemic change. The air in the room grew heavy with the promise of a new beginning, and as the reality of her ultimatum settled in, even Eric's feeble protests died away. The once glowing digital screen now bore witness to a turning point for TechRise, one that would shake the very foundation of its corporate culture and ultimately redefine respect within the company. The charged atmosphere in the conference room, still echoing the weight of Esther's decisive ultimatum, shifted dramatically as several uniformed security officers entered the room. Their presence sent an unmistakable signal. The era of unchecked arrogance was drawing to an end. Without hesitation, the officers approached Eric Jennings, who had been lingering near the doorway with a faltering expression, and swiftly escorted him out of the room. Close on his heels, one of the officers turned toward Caitlyn Morgan, whose previously defiant sneer had now been replaced by panic. "Please step outside," the officer said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, she followed, her voice barely a whisper of protest, as she was led toward the exit. Within the room, the shock was tangible. The murmurs of disbelief that had risen moments earlier now matured into a quiet but resolute silence. Esther, standing at the head of the table with unyielding calm, watched as the two employees, symbols of toxic elitism, were promptly removed from the premises. Every movement was captured by the cameras, and some staff members eyed the scene with a mix of relief and somber introspection. At that moment, a large screen in the corner flickered to life, not with pre-recorded evidence, but with a live video feed. On the screen, Devin Williams, the CEO of TechRise and son of Esther, appeared. Although he had not been physically present in the room until now, his presence on the video link resonated with authority. He leaned forward, his eyes steady and supportive as he addressed the assembled employees. "Good afternoon, everyone," Devin began, his deep voice carrying calm determination. "I have been following today's developments, and I want you to know that I stand fully behind my mother and her actions. What we witnessed this past week is unacceptable, and as of now, we are committing to a thorough overhaul of our policies and workplace culture. Every employee deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their position." His words echoed powerfully through the room, reinforcing the message that change was not just coming. It was already underway. Effective immediately, the actions taken today will serve as a catalyst for reviewing and reforming our internal practices. We intend to set a new standard here at TechRise, one based on fairness, accountability, and mutual respect. Behind Devin's composed expression, viewers could sense the deep personal commitment of a man who had learned early on the value of integrity. That same commitment was evident in Esther's calm, resolute face as she stood alongside him on the screen, a silent yet inspiring pillar of strength. As the security officers finished escorting Eric and Caitlyn out of the building, the room began to stir with subdued conversation. Some employees exchanged relieved glances, knowing that their voices had finally been validated. Others remained silent, letting the enormity of the moment sink in. The tension in the room, which had once been palpable and oppressive, now gradually gave way to a cautious optimism. The removal of the toxic elements was the first step toward the transformative changes that Devin had promised. "Let this be a lesson to every member of our team," Devin continued, his voice resonant over the live feed, "that our commitment to excellence is measured not just by profits or innovation, but by the dignity we uphold in our interactions every day." His words offered a stark contrast to the previous environment where demeaning remarks and unchecked contempt had festered. In that moment, Esther allowed herself a slight nod of approval as she observed the scene unfolding. Inside her, a quiet affirmation echoed. This was only the beginning. She glanced at the now empty doorway through which Eric and Caitlyn had departed, her mind racing with both relief and the burden of the secrets she had uncovered. Every recording, every note in her battered notebook, had been crucial, and now, with the leadership of Devin supporting her, she knew that a significant transformation was imminent. Across the room, some remaining employees began to murmur among themselves about the changes that were clearly coming. The harsh fluorescent lights and sterile furnishings suddenly took on a new meaning as whispers of reform sparked a ripple of hope. Nathan, known in the company simply as Devin, had pledged to ensure that every person who worked there, regardless of rank or position, would be treated with the respect they inherently deserved. As the meeting drew to a close, the live feed of Devin's words continued to inspire the room. The security call had been made, the evidence was irrefutable, and the people had witnessed justice in motion. Outside, the corridors of TechRise buzzed with hushed conversations of a new era dawning, while inside, the sense of accountability fortified every corner of the office. The stage was now set for the next phase, a complete review and restructuring of TechRise internal policies, driven by the courage of a mother who had seamlessly transitioned from a janitor in disguise to the formidable arbiter of truth and respect. The company, once mired in a culture of elitism and disrespect, was poised for an overhaul that would alter the lives of its employees and redefine what true leadership meant. In the weeks following the tumultuous confrontation, TechRise underwent a dramatic and heartening transformation. The scandal that had rocked the office was now the catalyst for sweeping internal reforms and a renewed commitment to dignity in the workplace. The company's board convened an emergency meeting, and soon, a new policy was announced across every screen in the office. A new corporate culture manual was distributed, emphasizing respect, inclusivity, and accountability for every employee, regardless of rank or role. Under the new management, senior executives introduced mandatory transparency and sensitivity training sessions. In heated boardroom discussions, Devin Williams, the CEO, and son of the brave Esther Williams, spoke with resolute authority. "Today, we begin a chapter where respect is non-negotiable," he declared in a meeting that was broadcast across departments via live webcast. Employees, many of whom had suffered years of indifference and cruelty, listened intently, nodding as he outlined concrete changes. The termination of Eric Jennings and Caitlyn Morgan had been just the first step. Disciplinary actions were to be reviewed for even minor instances of incivility, and an anonymous reporting system was implemented to ensure that everyone's voice could be heard without fear of reprisal. At the heart of the HQ, the polished walls and sleek conference rooms, once cold symbols of corporate detachment, now bore bright posters with messages like "Everyone matters" and "Respect is our foundation." Esther Williams, still donning her janitorial uniform as a reminder of her undercover mission, now walked the corridors with a newfound confidence. Colleagues who had once ignored her nodding respectfully as she passed by, and many stopped to express their gratitude. "I never knew how much we lost by dismissing others," one junior programmer remarked softly, his eyes reflecting the sincere change in the environment. News of the scandal and subsequent transformation spread rapidly through the local media. Headlines in major newspapers read, "TechRise transformed, a new era of respect and accountability," while social media exploded with hashtags such as #TechRiseReform, #RespectAtWork, and #ChangeStartsNow. Employees from every level shared stories of how the toxic behavior after the scandal had been replaced by open dialogue. In informal gatherings by the water cooler, many expressed relief. "It feels like we finally have a voice. No one's laughable remark goes unnoticed now," one employee confided, while another added, "I'm proud to work for a company that stands for something." At a company-wide town hall meeting, Devin took center stage to formally celebrate the changes. "This isn't just about policies," he said, his voice steady and warm. "It's about the respect we owe one another. It's about learning from our mistakes and evolving to create an environment where everyone, regardless of their role, is valued." His words were met with earnest applause, and Esther, sitting in the front row beside him, smiled with quiet pride. She had accomplished what she set out to do. Meanwhile, not everyone weathered the change gracefully. Eric Jennings and Caitlyn Morgan, whose behavior had been exposed so dramatically, struggled to find new roles in the industry. Rumors circulated that their reputations had been irreparably tarnished, and several recruitment agencies declined to offer them positions when questioned about their past conduct. Their once dismissive attitudes were now replaced by a bitter sense of regret and public accountability. As the office of TechRise settled into its new way of life, vibrant discussions spread throughout the corridors. Informal groups met to discuss not only work-related issues but ways to ensure that the spirit of mutual respect would endure. The atmosphere was different, lighter, more inclusive, and deeply reflective of a company that had learned its lesson the hard way. The transformation of TechRise, spearheaded by the courage of Esther Williams and the decisive intervention of Devin, soon became a case study for corporate reform. Industry conferences, business schools, and local media outlets hailed the event as a turning point, a reminder that even entrenched corporate cultures can be rewritten by the persistent demands for justice and respect. I hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a comment, sharing your thoughts about it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new and equally exciting stories. See you in the next video.